So I'll move right on to the speaker. His name is Dave Boleneus. He lives in Spokane. Dave was trained as a geologist and worked in mining, petroleum, and government for more than 45 years. He retired from the U.S. Geological Survey as research geologist a decade ago. He is also an eternally hopeful wheat grower wanting for those bumper crops that don't appear nearly often enough on the farm, which he and his sister operate in Lincoln County. He is a member of Citizens Alliance for Property Rights, I'll call that CAPER, in Washington. He volunteers for CAPER to speak about our topic tonight, the Hydro One purchase of Avista. He also represents CAPER on Spokane County's Voluntary Stewardship Committee, which is much akin to a landowners relief program to oppose leftist forces stifling private landowners and agriculture in Washington. His graduate research was especially helpful in understanding the role of carbon dioxide in the Earth's environment. He has appeared on KTW radio and elsewhere to discuss why there is no global warming, climate change, and speaks to the propaganda used to deceive us. This latter topic, he says, is intertwined with our topic tonight. So we are about to hear about how the socialist left operates in Ontario. And the reason NWPOA is having him here too is that we work hand in hand. We're kind of in an alliance with CAPER over in Spokane. They have a lot of the same issues that we do. We attend some of their meetings, they attend some of ours. So the more we could join forces, there's more strength in numbers. And then we heard, of course, some of the horror stories about Hydro One. So it's an important topic tonight, so I hope you guys might want to take some notes. So here's Dave Boleneus.
So welcome everyone, and how's the sound in the back? You're okay? Great. And the sound plenty loud. So as the bottom of my slideshow, there are 3 handouts. Actually, I had 6, and I didn't get them to summer in time. But the first one on the left is a 4-page summary with the letter I sent to the Idaho Public Utilities Commission. I sent a similar one to Washington as well. The second one is about a 40-page document, and it is fully referenced with about 170 references that covers everything possible on this topic. And then the last one are my PowerPoint slides, but they've changed a lot since they went to summer about a week ago. So you're getting the latest word.
And we do have those on our Facebook page, so if you want to go to NWPOA on our Facebook, they're linked on there.
And if someone wants to have something more recent than I'm showing, maybe we can have a sign-up sheet saying what you'd like to get. But I think we're pretty well covered on this. And so what I'm going to do is hurry along. This, as Jeff said, is very long. But I want to thank, of course, Jeff, Renee Holiday at Colville, Rich Laudenbach, Jim State, Gloria Clark and Cindy Zamataki at CAPER, and then John Jacob for getting the recent broadcast on Readout News just in the last few days. So I'm going to start. I was first alerted to this topic we'll be speaking about in August, and it took only a couple of days to recognize the danger. And the danger, as Jeff mentioned, is because my training in geology, I understand how carbon dioxide works in our environment. And for many years now, we've heard about how bad it is. Well, that's just, it's just exactly the opposite. And so I brought along 2 posters over there that discuss a lot of the topics. The posters were my talk about 2 years ago, and I was late in getting on the venue, so I made them for posters for the Homey River Forum about a year ago. So I'm gonna read this for the most part. This is too important to try to ad-lib. Although if I were talking to a geology audience, I would kind of walk back and forth and whatever I thought about at the time, I would say. But this is certainly different. And in fact, this audience is larger than any audiences I get when I speak on technical topics. So what I'm going to stress is what's not announced. And these are news reports and electric power publications from Ontario, their utility sector mismanagement, and numerous reports, videos, and the Ontario law that governs the operations of Hydro One. So I'll stress what's happening in the Ontario Climate Change Action Plan of 2016, an outgrowth of the province's 2009 Green Energy Act, including unwise build-out of wind turbines and the province's and Hydro One's customer relationships that they force the province's energy plans upon a once trusting public. And I'll speculate on how these actions might affect Avista customers if this acquisition is affirmed. Some of my comments are somewhat speculations, and so I hope you can see where I've maybe taken a bit of liberty there. So whether these actions in Ontario will adversely affect us here in Avista territory to join Hydro One seems somewhat or almost certain, but a degree of impacts are promised. Cindy and I, about 3 months ago, talked to two Avista officials, John Rothman and Colin Sprague, who work in government relations, and they reviewed the merger at a coffee club meeting. They voiced no concern about the merger with Hydro One. We were a little unhappy about it. And they said the only point they had to mention was that Hydro One's credit rating is better than Avista's, and so they can finance things at less expense. So, if Avista customers join Hydro One, decisions likely will come from Ontario. And I have a slide, and a lady, member of Parliament, promises that. So I'm going to state the conclusions here, because we may not get to my last 5 slides, which are the conclusions. So I'm going to try to hurry along. So this marriage is not good for, it provides absolutely no advantages to Avista customers. As you'll see, the deal provides numerous risks and several disadvantages, including those that Avista may not have divulged, but I really hold them almost blameless, and perhaps others that Avista is not aware. There is no evidence of a due diligence that I could find. The risks that spell huge trouble for customers here linked to Hydro One amount to 1, a significant rise in electric rates, 2, the uncertainty that the utility commissions will not, or cannot mitigate the risk, a 43% probability of an Ontario bankruptcy. Number 4, a worsening 10-year electric rate disaster seizing and overturning all life in Ontario. The statement by the Kitchener Centre, Ontario, Member of Parliament Diane Bernil, and that's the slide I mentioned, that she promises this, that Ontario will maintain control of Hydro One. Its board, its veto power, its regulatory and nominating authorities, including rate setting. I thought it was very stark that she would say this. Worse, the deal suggests that Hydro One wants Avista's hydro dams only to extinguish its fast approaching pretend climate debt in 2020, so that Ontario will take control of Avista's hydroelectric dams. Of course, they buy Avista, they have it all. A large and unwelcome force linked to this Green Energy Act was unleashed in a horse race of Canadian companies buying, consuming, acquired electric utility companies in the U.S. By February 2018, acquisitions worth $80.8 billion had been announced. Yes, climate change is the driving issue, but better term fake climate change. However, Ontario's law is not fake, but deeply rooted in propaganda and greed. Okay, so I forgot to show the, push this button. There we go. So the outline, I'm just going to cover this just really briefly. Many of the discussions are, the key discussions shown there in capital letters, news releases, green energy despite its cost, talk a bit about electric costs, and then we'll go on from Washington, Idaho to Ontario's. We're going to talk about Rory Strong. This man is the godfather, the grandfather of global warming. He created, thought it up. It's not based on any science whatsoever. Strong was the CEO of Ontario Hydro, the predecessor of today's Hydro One. And then I'm going to talk many slides about Ontario's Green Energy Act, the Climate Change Action Plan, their cap and trade, They're really what's called round 1 and round 2 of the Green Energy Act. And of course, there are extraordinary expansion of wind turbines and wind turbine farms, something like 5,000 or 6,000 of them on the foreshores of the Great Lakes. Now, maybe I'll get to renewable energy, but that also is another place we should not ever go, that we will never be able to afford, and they're already proving that every place in the world. And Ontario is learning a very hard lesson. And I probably won't get to the battling climate change part, but we have a governor in Washington who doesn't seem to learn. Next. So, what is hydro? And so there's a few points. I'm not going to go through them all. They're about 5 times the size of Avista. They provide 50 to 75% of Ontario's electricity. They are a transmission and distribution company. They do not generate power. They have assets. There's some numbers. I'm just going to. The only one thing I want to mention is that the amount of money they issue, or they are paying Avista $6.7 billion, likely will be paid by you and me within 2 years, because it's about half debt and half equity. And Avista, much of this you can get from the annual report, which is where I went to get it. The 2 subsidiaries are Avista Utilities and Alaska Light and Electric. The other serious problem is that the Sierra Club has forced the closure or for Avista to divest Colstrip coal-fired power plants units 1 and 2. And they're working very hard to force the closure or divesting of 3 and 4. Now, units 3 and 4 provide 1/3 of our electric supply. And so this could be a very serious issue. And Avista owns those along with Portland General Electric and Pacific Corp. So there's a slide about the history. In 1970, Hydroelectric Power Commission was rebranded Ontario Hydro. In the 1990s, Maury Strong, that I mentioned, took over as CEO of Ontario Hydro. He started the reorganization that eventually became Hydro One. And the other part there on the right, the third item on the right, is the government 2 years ago, in 2015, had pledged to sell 60% of Hydro One. So it will still remain a quasi-public, quasi-private company. And that gives it lots of liberties that we really don't want it to have. So this slide shows pictures of some of the dams in Alaska and in Washington. So on the top there, Avista owns 13 hydroelectric dams, 931 megawatts. And then they have 58 wind turbines which produce power whenever they wish. And there's 839 megawatts coming from thermal, either gas, wood, or coal. Part of that coal power is listed there. I didn't get a picture of it.
Yeah, you probably hit the button.
Let's see about that. Still says on. Oh, I should just. So this is of course our territory right now, but what likely is going to happen is something like this: New Ontario. And that's going to be brought about by this climate change action plan. That's the front page of their 2016 publication. So we're going to be talking about that quite a bit. Yeah. Talk about actors. So here we have some key folks on the front page. Al Gore, he's been pushing for us to buy carbon credits from his Chicago Climate Exchange, which he formed with Barack Obama and Maurice Strong. And of course, Maurice Strong there in the middle is, as I say, he's the grandfather of global warming. So we can't forget Barack Obama. Under my plan, electricity rates will necessarily skyrocket. So this is what rates are doing now in Ontario, skyrocketing. Ontario's leaders have anecdotally swallowed the Kool-Aid. They don't seem to understand what's happening. So just to go on here, now Strong was a senior advisor to Kofi Annan at the UN. Strong was he didn't graduate from high school, and his first job was with the UN. And he was eventually put in charge of the UN Environment Program, that eventually in 1992 chaired the giant UN Conference on the Environment, the Rio Summit in Rio de Janeiro, and assembled later the Kyoto Protocol. So these are Maurice Strong's beliefs there on the slide. As a UN official, he forces the manipulation of climate data to create imaginary villain, global warming, and manipulates the data. The left and hypes natural disasters as proof that fossil fuels and man are responsible. He stated before this conference, in his quotes, "We may get to the point where the only way of saving the world will be for industrial civilization to collapse. Isn't it our job to bring that about?" So all these dangers are caused by human intervention. He goes on to say, as does the Club of Rome, he says, "Thus the real enemy is humanity." Turn down. Hello. Is humanity itself. In other words, Strong's plan is to eliminate humanity, perhaps except for himself, but he died about 2 years ago. Strong is so important to Hydro's legacy and soon in yours that I'll try to track part of his career. So we'll go. Before I get to that, I just want to mention there's the four slides in the middle and the right are key scientists that dispute this global warming. The one on the lower right was a Nobel Prize winner, and the one on the upper left is William Happer. He was, we thought he was going to be chosen as President Trump's science advisor. So this, I'll just try to quickly go through this slide. Something like Maurice Strong's lifetime. In 1992, as I mentioned, he is CEO of Ontario Hydro, the predecessor to Hydro One. He receives $1 million kickback from Saddam Hussein's oil for food scandal, where the Korean Tonson Park is convicted in prison, but Strong flees to China. Earlier, he assessed North Korea's nuclear ambitions, scams a major water resource in Colorado, creates false global warming science to sell global governance, which has been tracked by Elaine Duar's book, Cloak of Green. Earlier, Strong has mentored to Gore, Obama. Each cashes in on the Chicago Climate Exchange IPO. Strong and Gore are on the exchange board, and Obama is on the board of the Joyce Foundation. This is before he was a senator. That provided startup capital to kickstart the climate exchange. Of course, President Obama goes on to force EPA's Clean Power Plan, forced closing of coal plants, the MACT rule, the Stream Protection Rule, methane rules, and on and on and on, everything against oil, coal, and natural gas. I don't want to forget these people. The man on the left, both of us are really out of touch with the science of climate, and of course they're using it against us. How Earth operates and the role of carbon dioxide. On the left is the president of the Sierra Club. He leads an organization whose principal function is to make your electricity more expensive. In December 2015 hearing, Senator Cruz questions about climate, this man, the role of CO2 for which he displays a complete emptiness on the topics. On the right is a representative. At that time he was a representative. He's now the governor of Washington. He co-authored this book to promote renewable energy for our country without relying on carbon-based fuels. The book's first chapter contains 29 errors that distorts and contradicts. That was all in the first chapter. Contradicts current knowledge on climate and the role of carbon dioxide. He's really very dangerous, making noises about becoming a Democratic run for president at this point. So there's all his 29 reasons. And I'll just go a little further. This is one slide I show in my presentations about what we haven't been told about climate change. And so these are just a few of the many, many reasons that what he thinks is true is not. And of course, this is what, of course, Al Gore and our Washington governor thinks is happening. The oil is burned by people, it creates carbon dioxide, and Mr. Gore says it causes temperatures to rise, affects the atmosphere, it's a pollutant, says the EPA, and he's claiming it's a global emergency. Well, they didn't realize that those linkages don't carry through. And they're shown in the green are the benefits of carbon dioxide. And of course, everything we eat is benefiting from carbon dioxide. And then we have President Trump, and they're celebrating at this point because this is about June 1 of last year. So on June 1, he announces exiting the Paris Agreement. Within 6 weeks, 21 countries follow his lead. Although we haven't realized it yet, but the Paris exit is equivalent to some kind of terms equivalent to re-winning World War II in terms of avoiding the eventual economic collapse of developed countries. Our own Canada should be hold fast to the Paris extortion. So we're going to go talk about electricity rates. So here we have electricity rates across the United States. In 2012, the Northeast states are very high, approaching about $20 or 20 cents per kilowatt hour. And Avista is 7.8 in Washington, and about a half cent less that in Idaho. So Hawaii and Alaska, of course, they're remote areas. That's a reason to explain their high rate, but California has no excuse. So here's the rates for Washington. Avista is the green one on the right side, 7.89 cents. Inland Power in the middle of 5.5. These rates, though, are not residential. These are general service rates for maybe moderate-sized businesses. They also have to pay a demand charge as well, which is in addition to this. And then for Idaho, here we are. Inland is the same price, but Avista is a little bit less, 5.9 or 6.3, and Kootenai at 5.9. In Northern Lights, Idaho Power is on top. So then now we'll go to Ontario. I got to know what slide number I am so I keep track of my notes. So we have, of course, the two on the right, Northwest Territories and Nunavut, are remote areas, so they have an explanation for high rates. But Ontario is the third from the right at average 18 cents. And I might mention that the 18-cent rate is what you can get from the internet. Like you could go to almost any utility in the US, go to their website, except for just a handful where you can't get it, and you can get the rates. And you can multiply your usage times the rate and fairly closely estimate what your bill is going to be. It doesn't happen that way in Canada. After about 1999, their rates have been hidden. They don't tell anybody. I have looked, into utility commissions' websites, into minutes and so on, and I can almost never find them. Now, what they do is they add odd prices onto the usage rate, which is the 18 cents. So there's a list of things on the upper left of what they add. And then they add the global adjustment charge. The global adjustment charge is pays for all the accidents the Energy Ministry makes and the Ontario Energy Board makes. In addition to that, it's the cost of shutdown of coal plants. It's building renewables on the order of 5,000 or 6,000. And it's the difference between the competitive price of electricity and what they pay in sweetheart deals to these new renewable generators, which wouldn't build the plants unless they were paid 10 times the rate that you can get electricity on the market. So the global adjustment charge is 70% of the total charge. And so the total charge here is who knows what, and they don't tell you. You just get a bill, and many people are suffering. So here on the table in the top lists 2 or 3 of the rates that Hydro One has. I think I can use my pointer. See that? So I'm just going to use the 29.9 rate for low density urban. And so since the Green Energy Act was passed, the rates have continued going up. And this rate was in 2015, right there, and then there was a 25% rate increase in 2016. So compare the electricity rate against the Consumer Price Index, which increased only about, I think it's only 13 or 17% over the 10-year period shown there in that chart. And then here's some comments about how much the rates have increased: 149% for off-peak electric, 71% on-peak, 107% average over 10 years, and then the 2006 increase too. Then the Consumer Price Index increased 17% compared to the 1% for US. Okay, so now we're going to talk about this topic that we really don't know and know about. So the Hydro One's costs, and there are several articles, and I brought 2 or 3 with me. They're on the back table. I only have 1 copy of each. Rocketed to the highest in North America in 2015. And at that time, their rate was 29.9 cents. Increased another quarter, 25% in 2016. And they promised to add another $285 in the next 2 years after that. Their billings are 12 times larger than their Avista's 2016 rate that I just showed you earlier, and 35 times larger, I didn't mention that, but on the far left of the Washington diagram was Chelan and Douglas County PUD, 35 times larger than their 2.36 cent rate. Other comments that I learned about Hydro One is their service is poor, it charges ratepayers more for deteriorating service, and it's ignored 10,000 complaints about high costs. Its outages are 30% longer, 24% more frequent. Its transmission system, its main business, is in considerable disrepair, the least reliable of Canada's distribution companies. So to date, the Ontario seniors cannot afford Hydro One's electricity. 1 in 20 of businesses are closing, and rural lights rely on backyard generators, and they weigh paying electric costs against feeding children. That was in print. 58,000 household disconnects even before Christmas. The disconnects increased 19% in 3 years to 2016. The debt for their electric rate arrears increased 28% in 1 year to 392,000. You know, that number I expect would be people that are well beyond natural gas pipelines. The population of Ontario is about 13.5 million, and I've learned that about 3 million are probably beyond the natural gas. So this number represents almost 8% of the population beyond the natural gas pipelines. Some comments from some of their customers. The lady there, Joanna in Timmins, Ontario, complains that it cost her $800 a month to heat that trailer. So Timmins is quite a ways north. Mayor Watson said hydro rates are killing small businesses. The seniors are at fixed incomes, can't afford the bills. And the grocery is closing in Echo Bay because they can't afford the compressor cost to chill food. And then if you go to the internet and search for these topics, you can see all of this come up. And then here's the father or son in Echo Bay when they encountered the empty coolers. Another elderly couple in Moosonee, Ontario. She said, I get upset when I have to pay my bills and count out pennies. That's paying the hydro bill is difficult. And so to conserve energy, they unplug everything they can and use the barbecue for cooking. This lady, Mrs. Dobbins from United Way, says wind stories absolutely fits the definition of energy poverty, that people are making these massive lifestyle adjustments without results. They're angry, frustrated, they're being told it's their fault they left a light on. So Dobbin also added that she's encountered people who have had to walk away from their houses because their hydro bill, that's their electric bill, is bigger than their mortgage. Then at the bottom, Ms. Dobbins said, it's totally a crisis. If we had 30 people in our community with measles, it would be a health crisis. We had, 3,000 people sick from E. coli in Walkerton a time back. That was a crisis. And yet the energy minister there, next to the last item, said that he didn't think it was a crisis, but they have 60,000 people disconnected. So, the Green Energy Act. So this is where the trouble started in 2009. With the rate increases, I mentioned some of those. The third item on the left under Hydro One is that they have rolled out this smart meter program, and it's so-called far cost $2 billion, not working, and most benefits unrealized. And of course, we've heard movements around here about that as well. The electric rates, the Auditor General in Ontario says Ontarians have overpaid for electricity by $37 billion. And there's several parts to that. And then there's Chrysler CEO has a comment, and other ones. But there's another customer comment in the upper right. He says, my electric bills are $880 a month, and that's only heating kitchen, bathroom, one bedroom. He said, I close off all other rooms in the home during the winter months. And then the lower right is the current rates. Shown in yellow is the one that I knew absolutely existed. And that was reported in one report I showed you earlier. And then there was a 25% rate increase in 2016. And I saw other comments that said that the rates have accelerated 18 to 25% a year. And so I carry that to this year. Their rate is 52 cents. Next year it'll go to 61 cents. So these are customers of Hydro One would have that rate. The Toronto Hydro is the other large utility, and I don't have any comment about what their rates are. And then there's the other part. These are the people in charge, the Ministry of Energy, and some of their comments about their activities. Their planning process is broken. The ministry plans are not reviewed for whether they're prudent or not. They operate against planners' advice. They offer renewable generators at well above market rate feed-in tariffs, which have cost customers $9.2 billion. That's part of that other money that was wasted that I showed on the last slide. They don't review contracts. They are this year implementing cap and trade. the cap and trade is the round 2 of the Green Energy Acts that people there I have read, and that's what they call it. So ratepayers are going to be paying well above market price for electricity, overpriced by the Global Adjustment Charge. And the Global Adjustment Charge largely is the difference between competitive priced electricity and what the Energy Ministry just wants to give to the generators. So I think you can see the point here now. I really wanted to show what's happening in Ontario because as we go along here, I'm going to show that we're going to have a promise from the Member of Parliament that they're going to be dictating perhaps conditions that happen here. And there's other comments on the right. I won't go through them. So the one important comment here is the generators are guaranteed a $135 per megawatt hour tariff and access to the transmission grid. They're guaranteed that, and so they produce power all the time, whether it's needed or not. And at this point, they're generating so much excess power, which the generators are not willing to slow, that it's costing the ratepayers more and more money. It's costing, I'm not sure exactly what the number is, but they're almost giving away this electricity to adjacent Manitoba and New York at about 2% of what the ratepayers are paying for it. And so this is one of the reasons that the prices are going so high so fast.
So the people in Ontario are paying for New York's power?
Yeah, they're paid 2% of what the power is actually worth. And the Ontarians are paying the rest. So the point now, and some people have mentioned this, the best thing to do is to cancel their renewable contracts. But it seems like the Premier is not interested in that, nor is the Minister of Energy. So as I mentioned, at this point, they still owe about $132 billion in forward costs if they continue this particular way they're going. And so part of it has to do with wind turbines. And so the colored green and blue are where the wind turbines are built in southern Ontario. And if you've been here, Niagara Falls is right there. So experiences on 3 continents for the world provides clear evidence that wind cannot economically or reliably provide electric supply. In Ontario, Washington, Minnesota, New Hampshire, Germany, California, Denmark, Spain, the UK, Australia, and China. They all have the same complaints. Stop these things. And that's the name of the website that publishes so much about Ontario. And Ontarians have demonstrated for several years now, and many of their exploits are shown on their website, Ontario Wind Resistance. Anyway, the key point about this slide is that a similar government agency in Ontario, a custodian of a website for information of this type, is not available in Washington or Idaho or Oregon. Right now, the only source of information I have is from Bonneville Power Administration because they are the balancing authority or balancing agency for power that's produced. So we really need to have a public agency that monitors the costs. And in fact, it was the Avista engineers that directed me to Bonneville Power Administration. Okay, so now I'm going to move into the costs of round 2, the cap and trade. And so we'll comment about that a bit. So first off, here, this is a list of companies that have started buying U.S. utilities. These are Canadian companies for the most part. And the reason they're doing this is because they're forced to under Ontario law. They must have clean energy assets, whatever that means. Of course, it would mean hydropower or some other kind of renewable. And so that is, in my mind, the reason that Avista is targeted. And so you can see the prices there of the 6 items on the left, those total $80 billion on their own. Then there's the others that are kind of mixed. And on the right are a list of targets that was mentioned in the Forbes magazine, that those folks may be acquired yet too, for the same reason. So I want to go through this. It kind of explains what cap and trade is. So Hydro One avoids paying an $8 billion charge to purchase carbon credits to avoid capping its emissions, so it could go higher, that is, due to Ontario's Green Energy Act, if it acquires renewable energy assets to satisfy the trade option before 2020. That's a key date. So these permit fees must be paid to Ontario or California or Chicago climate exchanges through aggregators like Al Gore's company to allow it to obtain a permit to exceed arbitrary greenhouse gas emissions limits unless they are granted a waiver. So the $6.7 billion purchase of Avista satisfies the trade to receive a waiver. Following the purchase, Hydro One is permitted to increase its greenhouse gas emissions. But then, Hydro One is both satisfied its cap and trade obligation for $1.3 billion less than the $8 billion it was originally due in that first paragraph, but acquired also an income-generating company, Avista, and its assets of 13 hydroelectric dams. What a deal. So the deception of the public to the public and cap and trade, a sham. The purpose of cap and trade is to reduce carbon emissions. In this case, there is only trading taking place. The receipt of a government-issued permit allowing increased greenhouse gas emissions without a hint of reducing emissions. Cap and trade's original purpose in the 2009 Senate bill before the U.S. Senate was to reduce emissions. There is no way that it would ever do that. And in fact, that is such an important report to read if you're interested in this topic. And it's listed in my reference list that I mentioned. So here are the costs of round 1 and round 2. So the total round 1 cost $172 billion. And we haven't got to round 2 yet. And so the $172 billion is only a small part paid so far by the people of Ontario. So they still have a large part of the debt remaining. And they're looking forward to round 2, where they're going to be charged perhaps $3,247 per month per household. In addition, in 2018, Canada-wide starts a carbon tax at $30 per ton, and then it's going to accelerate after that. So here are a few items, just some headlines. So just some of them, the headlines: turbine construction turns drinking water to sludge. Residents revolt against wind. Thousands disconnected. Wind obsession sends prices into orbit. Eco-fascists kill coal, but agenda kills Ontario instead. So that's just a sampling of those. These articles are all obtained in a short time. They were published on stopthesethings.com, which is an Australian website, but Ontario gets a lot of press there as well. Do I have to stop at 7 o'clock?
7:30. No, 7:30.
7? I go to, okay, that'll help. So here's a picture of the Premier, Kathleen Wynne. So she says this about the Climate Change Action Plan. The province will link up with the existing Quebec, California cap and trade systems. That's the plan that's severely injuring Ontario already. The reason is clear. The Green Energy Act negotiated feed-in tariffs almost 4 times the existing electricity rates to wind generators and 10 times the existing rate for solar providers, and then lock these in for 20 years, 20-year contracts. So then the article on the right is also very disturbing. It explains that the legislation to sell off Hydro One in 2015, that in that legislation, it removed all public oversight of the company. It stripped all rights of watchdogs to investigate Hydro One and resolve complaints. It bars all FOIA requests and shields high-paid employees from being questioned about their salaries under the Sunshine List. So those are things that we'd anticipated to be able to complain about, but we're actually, everybody is locked out of those opportunities. So there's one page in the Climate Change Action Plan book. Yeah, they're virtues, I know, right? So in 2014, you can see the number about in the middle is 6%. Point to it. 6% right here. There's supposed to be 6% reduction of their emissions below 1990 levels by 2014. By 2020, 15% below. This is the year that they were satisfied by buying Avista. And then by 2050, they'll be 80% below. Well, good luck. So what I've done here in order to forecast what the cost will be in dollars is to just create a multiplier, and so you can see if this goes from 6 to 80, the multiplier increases a lot, and so this is the influence on the price of the dollar. So it's 1 here in 2014. The dollar's going to cost you $12.30 more by 2050. So I'm going to use that here in a couple more slides. So I think I pretty well explained the cap and trade. I don't need to go over the comments on the right, except to say it's really a false hope. So here's the end of my forecast. There's the numbers on the top that you saw 2 slides earlier. So as I'm applying these numbers times the numbers given on page 15 of their pamphlet, they say the carbon price is $157 per ton, and the energy cost per month is $107. So if you use the multipliers and carry that forward, the cost in 2050 will be those two numbers total to $3,247. That's the monthly bill per household if this plant actually carries that far. That's the penalty for reducing emissions but undergoing cap and trade. So I want to give here an example of the pain it caused, and the pain it's caused, and other people have already realized this. In British Columbia, the carbon tax is $30 per ton. A BC company's been paying this for about 3 or 4 years. Its bill was $55 million in 2015, $48 million in 2016. And of course, I mentioned that Canada, they now have a tax on carbon that's $30 per ton, will increase to $50 in 4 years. But there is a country, Australia, that realizes socialism is masquerading as environmentalism. And that's Tony Abbott. Before Tony Abbott was the Prime Minister, Julia Gillard, that's how you pronounce her name, she installed a carbon tax in Australia of $15 per ton. Now you can see on the chart at the bottom, the unemployment immediately rose, but when Tony Abbott was elected, he legislated and ended the carbon tax, and then eventually the unemployment rolls started to moderate from what they were there. So you can see the very steep slope on the unemployment curve in that graph. That's what a carbon tax causes. And that's the only thing they had that would drive the price up. Okay, as you've kind of guessed now, the cap and trade is not a market solution, but it's really an invisible penalty that masks, consequences or rhetorical benefits that politicians put forward. It creates really an artificial scarcity of our fuels that's not related to supply whatsoever. So cap and trade really contains elements of centrally planned economies, a massive energy tax, a method to transfer important economic decisions from private hands to government with a net loss of gross domestic product. So, and its main objective is, like Boris Strong's, the objective is to collapse industrial civilizations. Another really repulsive attribute applied to carbon dioxide, or the way it's vilified, is that it's no more than a, or at least the actions against carbon dioxide, it's no more than a permanently installed, full-scale experiment for which no pro or con, or proof of concept, or pilot data exists. It amounts to freewheeling politicians dictating about climate from a government whose understanding of climate is nil and the consequences of its actions are null and void from the start. And one comment I would make about cap and trade is those costs never appear on your electric bill. Those costs are applied to all sorts of goods you buy, ones that are transmitted perhaps across international lines, ones that use trucks for transport because those trucks have to pay carbon tax on their fuel, or any place where there's fuel involved, there's a cost added by cap and trade. So Ontario joined the Western Climate Initiative, joined by my state. So it uses carbon pricing as a cornerstone to battle climate, to reduce what some call carbon pollution, but the Trump EPA will reverse this rule. Promoters expected, like in California and Ontario, to get incomes of about $1.8 billion a year. And I saw similar numbers from the Washington State legislative bill about the carbon tax. So they can still imagine a competitive economy while all this is happening. But you can see on the lower right what Trump is doing or what Trump is undoing. You know, repeal the Clean Power Plan, exited the Paris Agreement, reviewing the endangerment finding, the other things that I've also mentioned before, just everything that we'd like to see. But really the damage is not complete yet. And so here's some other examples. Cap and trade is meant to increase the price of energy by about 85%, which is the new cost that some imagine would be the cost of renewable energy. It doesn't reduce emissions, as I mentioned. And really most damaging, it disproportionately harms the poor and lower income families. For example, a 15% reduction in carbon dioxide where you're forced to use less fuels costs the poor 15% of their incomes. Obama wanted a decrease of CO2 of 83%. Ontario wants 80%, which would cost the poor 85% of their incomes. It also harms energy security. It erodes the U.S. and Canada's ability to produce domestic energy. But one other detestable aspect of cap and trade is it does not impact climate, because carbon-based fuels and carbon dioxide have absolutely no effect on climate. So this fully legitimizes its purpose. So any impact of cap and trade is impossible. So I just mentioned this chart that shows gross domestic product on the left side charted against energy use on the bottom. And you can see the United States is way at the top because we use so much energy, but we create so much income and a large gross domestic product in return. And you can see some of the benefits. Successive industrial revolutions have resulted. Population growths, incomes increased 11-fold, and on and on. So here is Diane's promise. So if there's ever a reason to oppose Hydro One buying Avista, this is it. This is Diane Verneal, Kitchener Centre, Ontario Member of Parliament. She says in this video, Ontario will unlock assets of Hydro One to build Ontario's infrastructure. Well, that's good, probably. They'll sell off 60% of Hydro One through IPOs. They will control Hydro One's board. They will appoint directors, maintain veto power and nominating authority to the board. They will set rates. They will maintain regulatory control. So essentially she's saying that Ontario government will control Avista. I mean, that's we're getting a really high probability that this will happen. It will set Avista's rates. We'll appoint members of Avista's board to do Ontario's bidding to dictate Avista's customers in Avista territory to satisfy Ontario's Green Energy Act, perhaps. I don't know, what the future will hold. So really, there's nothing to stop them, except you. And then even the people in Ontario dislike what's going on. There's all their objections in various videos that I could get when I finally found Diane's YouTube video. Do I have 20 minutes? Okay. Hey, anybody have any questions at this point? We could take a minute or two. Yes?
Is there any congressional remedy, like talking to Wall Labrador or somebody like that? He doesn't have too much time left in office, but is that a possibility? Or Portland Press, I don't know how much is going to matter.
Anything you can do. I am out of breath when it comes to trying to do my part. I have written a lot. Rich has got 3 articles of mine published, and then the Redoubt News has had 2, and there were, we had a podcast this week. I've talked about this issue. This is the 3rd time. So yeah, we need lots of help. We need to get a critical mass going, certainly. So anything anybody can do, you're welcome to use the material I have on your website as you wish. Anything I have is yours free.
Talk to your neighbors and let people know about this. People don't know that this is going on.
Right.
And there was a candidate forum, but there was a candidate forum last night, and people, even I guess if you talk to Avista, they say it's a done deal, but the candidate said, no, you still should be writing to your congressman and your senator. It's not a done
What
deal.
with the rate,
What?
announcement on the 17,000, what was
I can't hear you.
the Congressman?
Ralph Labrador.
Yes, I have an appointment on the 17th at 3 o'clock.
Oh, okay. Well, I do know that I have a slide that shows what the public meetings are going to be that Avista will hold, or somebody will hold. I forget who's hosting now. So there's a chance for people to go there, talk to your neighbors, talk to your legislators. The state legislators are probably the better ones to talk with, but certainly Raul Labrador would be as well. Yeah, Rich.
I got an email that there's an endeavor of some interested opponents to get together and discuss an optional approaching of some other suitors to cut out bid and Avista. Is there anything to that you're aware of?
No, it's not. I can visualize
It was
any.
in Washington about a week ago. I'll forward it to you.
I can visualize any of these other utilities that if the citizens would give them support, that they could put together a bond issue and do this very thing. And they could probably put out more money than Avista has agreed to in their board. So it's not impossible to do something and pay more money for Avista. Perhaps Kootenai Electric wants to buy it. Or you can come, maybe there's a friendly board, Kootenai or Inland. I'm just suggesting. Yes?
Is Avista's natural gas involved in any way on this?
Not that I know of.
Well,
but,
if they're running the company,
they're going to be controlling it, yes. So I guess it would be involved. So,
but would their natural gas fall in the same category as their designs on the coal-fired power plants?
I don't know.
Number of gas-fired.
I don't know. I don't have an answer. I have very few answers.
I got here late, so has Avista's board agreed to sell to?
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Everybody seems to have agreed except the 5 utility commissions. in the 5 states, Alaska, Oregon, Washington, Idaho, Montana. They still have not decided, and so this is where you can voice your opposition if that's what you had in mind. Yes, Richard.
Is it my understanding that the Washington board is an unelected board?
I don't know what they are.
I was told that.
You know, I can't imagine that even people with Avista have my background to recognize what's going on here. And I've heard no word whatsoever that anyone has ever visited Ontario. Do any of you have relatives or friends in rural Ontario? Maybe some silver miners went up to some of the mines in Ontario, to Durand or something. You know, maybe could find out what their experience is. See if it's like that elderly couple. Yes?
I received an email just before we walked into this meeting saying that the FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, has approved this, and it did in January, but the U.S. Committee on Foreign Investments has not yet approved it. So that would be another place you could write.
Okay, so that's where rural Labrador could perhaps help. Yes, in the back.
Can any one of the Public Utilities Commissions queer the deal? Must it be unanimous among them all, or just a majority?
I don't know. I don't know. I'm just an Avista customer, just like you. I just happened to recognize this and thought, oh, this is not right. And so my background is really very limited. Yes, yes.
These people at Avista, it sounds to me like they've gone insane. Well, what's in it for them? And why are they
Money.
All of the money.
Well, they're paid a share price is about 30% above what it's been on the New York Stock Exchange. And Scott Morris, the CEO, has a $10 million payoff coming when it's approved. Now other board members don't have nearly that much stock, but except Scott Morris, and all except one board member are running for re-election as board members. Yes.
I'm quite certain that Avista's or Idaho Public Utility Commission is having a meeting in Coeur d'Alene at 1505 North 5th Street on April 18th. And it's to get questions from people here. It's not a hearing. There'll be hearings on the decision after that. And they haven't set the places for the hearing.
Okay, well, that's good information.
I got that today.
So some of you can perhaps appear there. I have a lot of commitments.
Can you take that again, please?
Yeah, would you repeat that?
A little louder.
There's a central community building on
Just tell
5th
us.
Street at 1505. I located
Okay.
it today before I
Was it on the 18th of April?
Idaho Public Utilities, April 18th, just what time?
You can go to the commission and they have a record of all their
I have
agendas.
it with me, but I don't know if I can.
So I suggested go on the internet and you can see their record for both Idaho and Washington and others. I'm going to continue.
And you can also go, we're aware of that meeting in NWPOA, so go to our website or Facebook and we'll have it up there.
Okay.
So I just want to continue here on this. I just want to mention the world energy consumption, that 95%, and actually it's more like 99%, I think I wrote it down here. 96% of all energy consumed is from coal, oil, or natural gas. And the remaining 4% is from nuclear or hydroelectric. The renewable is so small, it hardly makes a dent on this chart. So the total renewable is 0.5% and 0.1%, which you could add together. That's worldwide. So here on the left are a few of the articles that have appeared. Then on the right, I've charted some of the recent prices of electricity in various countries. And so the prices on the left going from bottom to top, and there's Chelan County PUD at the bottom in Washington, 2.3 cents. And then on the left to right, is the renewable capacity per person or per capita in those countries. So here's Avista, 7.8 cents. In Washington, there's the US average, there's Washington average. Then here's the 2015 rate for Hydro 1, 29.9 cents. This is converted to US currency. Then here it is today. And so, is this what we want? I don't want that. And so there's the lady in charge. They're in Ontario. And there's, again, the electric rate charge. So I want to talk, since we're going to be tortured by renewables, I want to mention this. It was a chart made after the approval of the nuclear power plant in the UK in the western part of Wales that would produce a huge amount of electricity, 2,968 megawatts. It's the third nuclear plant they have in Wales in that site, which is about double the size of a coal plant. So it would occupy 430 acres, but it would supply 7% of the electricity for all of England. To get the same amount of electricity from wind turbines, they're shown, see all the wind turbine symbols over here on the right, it would require an area of 250,000 acres. Now, it's really different in Ontario, because in Ontario they have a setback, it's like a building code setback from the street, where you can't build a wind turbine within, I think it's within 1,100, or 550 meters of a house. And so that means the area to equate to the power coming from the Hinkley plant over here would require an area almost 1.5 million acres in Ontario to match the power from that nuclear plant. And of course, Idaho and Washington are not windy states like, say, Texas is, or there's some others perhaps that are more windy than we are. So there's only a few prime locations where you could build wind turbines. And the other problem with wind turbines is they just kind of work when they want. And then the other thing is this. Good old smart Warren Buffett. Wind farms don't make sense without the tax credit. He says he'll do anything that's basically covered by the law to reduce Berkshire's tax rate. For example, we get with wind energy a tax credit if we build a lot of wind farms. They don't make sense without the tax credit. And you can see in the table in the lower right, natural gas and coal get a tax credit of 64 cents per megawatt hour. That's how much you would use maybe in 1 month in your house. Whereas wind energy is getting $56. Solar energy is getting $775. And of course, we're all paying for that, even though we may not use that. I noticed in Avista's mail, with my bill, they had buy a block of renewable, or spend $1 and get a block of renewables. Well, that's because they're forced to do that. And I have, thank goodness you're in Idaho. I have a map here that's the map of the United States. It shows which states have renewable portfolio standards. There's 29 states that have swallowed the Kool-Aid. Washington, Montana, Oregon, California. They say they're going to have 15% renewable in Montana by 2015. Washington says they're going to have 15% by 2020. California says they're going to have 50%. How they going to do that? Well, Jerry Brown won't be there. So anyway, so you can see Idaho is not on that list, and I'll stay off of that. So here, this is actual data now I'm going to show you about, and it came from, thanks to Avista engineers, told me, go to the Bonneville Power Administration because they have balancing authority for the Northwest so they control If there's power coming from one source, they'll shut another one down. So that's what they're doing with the wind turbines. If they're working at full speed, they shut down the water power. Maybe they just let the water go over the dam. They don't generate any power. So this diagram on the right is the output for 6 months in 2015. Here's the list of all of the 46 wind farms, and there's their capacity, 4782 megawatts. The red line is their capacity right up here. But you see on this, it's like a bed of nails or a needle diagram. So their capacity never gets up there. And it's very intermittent. And look at all the places where there's no wind, no electricity. Do you know people that are saying that we need to go renewable, we need to go clean energy? This is clean energy. You know, how long do you want to go without your cell phone, or your television, or your refrigerator, or your lights working? That's what renewable energy is. So what I just added a little diagram. There's an upside down wind turbine because it's not working and it's relying on the dam. It's not a very good dam right there. So it's upside down here, and there's the coal plant generating electricity instead of the wind. So the total for the first 4 months of 2015, those wind turbines were all down for almost 37 days. So the reason they're down is because of weather inversions. You can imagine, you know, we have this little bit of smog that gathers at a certain level too. It used to be really yellow when I was younger, but it's cleaned up a lot now. So that's the reason when you can't build enough turbines because they're all down at the same time. So these are, I don't know. So just a few comments. There's a lot of really bad information or bad experiences come from this, from the UK, from Spain, Canada. So the Danes are the example that President Obama said were the example to follow, yet they pay the highest electric rates of EU for their renewable energy, along with Germany. They're the two highest next to Ontario. And they still pay $376 million in subsidies, and they still export, and they give away 57% of their wind power. Their subsidies pay workers, wind workers, $140,000 per job, which is 250% higher than the average Danish workers pay. Wow. So there's some bad feelings between neighbors there. In Spain, each renewable job created caused the loss of 2.2 jobs elsewhere in Spain's economy. And each green megawatt destroyed 5.4 jobs elsewhere. And finally, when 9 of the 10 jobs that were created during construction ended when construction ended. In Germany, its energy minister says the country's reached its limits with renewable subsidies and its highest electric rates in the European Union. He says Germany currently risks deindustrialization, and yet its emissions rise, and it's going to build 12 or 18 new coal-fired power plants. In South Australia, which is the most horrible experience, a winter storm in South Australia last winter and a heat wave during the summer in 2017 each caused blackouts leading to grid failures due to their excessive reliance on wind farms that now represent 41% of their supply. All except the Liberals realize the wind electricity is unstable when it's stressed. The last event caused spot electric rates to spike to $13,440 per megawatt hour. There's the spike. That's $13.44 per kilowatt hour compared to our 6 cents? Yes. So what do? Their answer to stabilize the grid and avoid the blackout risk was that the government operator ordered the GM coal factory in Holden to close. The loss of 13,000 jobs. And the story goes on. So here's other experiences. There's the water in Ontario, turned to toxic sludge. You see the one in the lower right? You know, looks like the farmer is holding oil, like a jar of oil. And others.
What causes that?
Well, it was caused by the pile driver when they were putting in pilings for the wind turbine that had to be engineered to an extreme degree, apparently.
Can I point something out?
Yes.
Go back to that other slide. The one with the solar grid. This is one thing I'm.
Whoops.
Go.
One.
Yes, okay.
Oh,
Go.
right there.
Yes. That other one's solar, right?
Yes, I think
Okay,
so.
notice how the ground underneath it has been sterilized, because that's what I'm concerned about out in Rathdrum. There's a solar demonstration project from Avista, and they've had to kill that soil so that the weeds don't grow up through the solar panels.
Oh,
And that's killing us, you know, I mean, that could be getting into our aquifer.
That's a real environmental threat.
That's a
The
real
other is
environmental
missing.
threat.
Oh,
There's
the
no way they
aquifer.
can mow, there's no way they can graze that land. They have to use chemicals to kill it.
We better end here soon, my voice is going away. So I tried my best to get the information possible to determine what a wind turbine costs. You know, what it costs to build it, to operate it, and then how much income it can make. So what I had to do was, I was able to estimate all these costs, the capital costs, the operation and maintenance, the capacity factor, transmission costs. So I got a lot of these, but these are all explicit costs. I was only able to get one of these in the list of implicit costs. But in those 5 items I came up with, here's the cost of $388 per megawatt hour. It's 38.8 cents. So, but that's leaving out all of these other factors. So whatever wind turbine electricity costs, we don't know. And that's where our legislature needs to help out if we're going to have to be involved in this. There's simply no information available. And in fact, of course, all the people that build these wind turbine plants, they know what the costs are. And so that's probably why they use, as I said on my chart up here, thuggery to get their way. And likewise, well, just battling climate. This is a true story in case you never followed that. So here's another horror story. I need to read this too. So this is the economic impact of limiting or taxing carbon dioxide and the forecasted impacts under the Paris Climate Agreement and Obama's EPA Clean Power Plan. So last week, a finance talk in Reno, actually it was about 6 months ago, called this the CPP, the Create Poverty Plan. So, but anyway, onto the Paris climate, the chart on the left, the red and green bars show world per capita GDP income. Currently, it's $10,000. So if we stay out of the Paris Agreement, we can expect that our income will go up here to $30,000. If we allow the 21 or 22 mayors or governors, whoever they are, including the one in Washington and California, force us to go with the Paris Agreement, there's where our income will go. And that's a 95% reduction. It's actually looks like it's less than what Haiti is today. We just, you know, people, they're trying to kill us, and this is the way it seems to be going. So on the right is one other example. It's not quite as extreme. But if we continue with a clean power plan, it'll cause electric rates to jump at least 10% in 41 states and to spike about 40% in other states. And then in Washington, there was this very interesting report that talks about Washington's emissions. And of course, our governor wants to end all of our emissions, but right now they're about 1/4% of global emissions. If just for example, Washington ended all of its emissions, it would be replaced in 35 days from other countries. So there's just no purpose. If they ended all emissions, the second item, second check mark, it would yield a temperature savings of 1/1000th of a degree. You can't measure that. That's the forecast. The third item, if we end all emissions, it would yield a sea level rise savings of, what is it, 8/1000th of an inch. And so we continue the same vein on the right. If the cost to meet Washington's planned legislative emissions, household income losses would be $8,200 a year by 2030. Job losses would be 82,000, and GDP losses would go along the same way too. So, let me just get that. But anyway, so here are some of the websites, and I list these with the PowerPoint slides that are on your website. At this point, I think I've covered most of the conclusions, so I'm not going to go through. There's 5 slides that have conclusions. The one I want to mention, though, is right here. In Washington, Governor Inslee wants to install a carbon tax. He's failed 3 years in a row. He wants a $30 per ton carbon tax. That would cost $13 per tank fill. Or if you have a 3-car family, $1,987 a year for just an average driving. Now, that carbon tax, 70% of that carbon tax you're paying for air. If you think, there's 2 parts that go into combustion. There's air and then the fuel. As it's burned, it's giving off water and carbon dioxide. It gives off a great deal of carbon dioxide, which is very heavy, but the air goes into making that carbon dioxide. The oxygen in the air goes to make the oxygen in the carbon dioxide, the C and the O part. So only 30% of the tax is actually on the fuel. And then on Sunday, this article appeared in Spokesman Review. He's talking about the upper 4 or the lower 4 dams on the Snake River. And the man says, in the second paragraph, even using BPA's own numbers, this study shows that replacing the energy from the lower Snake River dams is doable and affordable. The dams will provide about 4% of the region's electricity. At the same time, the dams have been responsible for declining salmon populations. Well, I testified in front of the Washington Senate committee last year and showed that the salmon populations are doing just fine. Salmon, like other fish, have been on this world for 500 million years. And to think that they need our help to get along is totally foolish. So replacing the dams is not feasible. It's a waste of effort. And the BPA data is just the opposite. The 4% is not relevant. And then I got my numbers out and said there's 33 dams on the Columbia and Snake River now. They produce 25,000 megawatts. They can serve 8.45 million households now. In 25 years, there will be 8.7 million households in the 4-state region. And plus, we go a little further, wind has a capacity 37% larger than the 4 upper Snake River dams. And there's the 2 numbers. Yet it produces that amount, which is 64% less than the Snake River dams. And plus, when the wind turbines are off, they're off. And they require full-time backup. Why do we need turbines at all if we have hydroelectric dams or some other source? And then there's this aspect. So trade goes up and down the Snake River all the way to Lewiston. There's the trade. So here's the trade that goes from the mouth of the snake up to Lewiston. More than 4 million short tons a year. And of course, that's Idaho product, Montana product, and so on. I was really angry when I saw that. So here's a list of the articles that have been published. I think that's on the website, so you can get that list there, and there's more information you ever need. There's the list of hearings. I don't know who's holding them. Spokane Valley, April 23rd. It was in the article I just showed from the Spokesman Review. April 24th, Colville, Othello, Colfax.
Who's putting those presentations?
I don't know. He didn't say. There's the man. I had something else. Oh, so here's what they haven't told you. My time's up. I think my time's up, so that's about it. I had a 90-slide talk when I went to Colville to talk about this. There was this topic, so there's way more to tell, and everybody said their butt was tired. Okay, thank you for giving me this opportunity. Yeah, questions? Yes.
Yes. When I saw your analysis of the wind turbine, you were looking at energy costs. If you look at building wind turbine, look at the energy balance of building the wind turbine. How many kilowatt hours it takes to build the turbine, and how many kilowatt hours it can produce over its lifetime. It never makes up. It never gets out of the hole. It's an energy hole.
Yeah, being familiar with the resources since I've been mining all my career, I looked at the mineral commodity summary that's published every year by U.S. Geological Survey, and I wanted to see what it takes to build 10% of our renewable capacity of wind turbines.
Ignore it.
And anyway, to do that, I compared the resources needed for the steel and the oil for the turbine blades and all the other items, the concrete, the aggregate. The resources needed are something like 1,000 to 10,000 times larger than our current annual production of those iron ore, copper, oil, aggregate. Nobody's looked at this. It was mentioned, so I thought I would just go a little further. I'm just dumbfounded to see the numbers. Yes?
6 years back, I built, I think, the largest photovoltaic array in North Idaho. It's privately owned. It's a 55 kilowatt array. It generated about 90 megawatt hours a year. And the only way it was even remotely economically feasible to do it was to take the tax credits and then to do a lot of the work myself in order to erect this array. But if it pays off in 30 years, I'll be lucky.
Wow. So did you get $775 per megawatt hour?
No.
No.
But I do sell the power, it's grid tied, so I sell the power back to Avista at P-Town, basically, and I use it as a giant battery. But the economics of it aren't there. And the only reason I did it was anticipating that the energy prices would spike, and that's how I buffer against having to pay $3,000 a month for electricity.
Yeah.
Also, you gotta consider too, Idaho is not considered, sunny in some places. I mean, we have a lot of cloudy days here. Places like Arizona and Mexico.
We get 4 hours a day on average of sun.
Right.
So it's not very, especially in Idaho, it's not very practical.
Well, don't take that down, Brent. If the Tiger One comes in, it may pay off after all.
So thinking about this chart, these are the states that have renewable portfolio standards. And here I have a slide about that. The need for renewables right here is based on 4 lies. First, we must get off oil. Second, we must use clean energy that does not produce carbon dioxide. We need carbon dioxide for food. And it's good for humans. Third, it's the cause of the physically impossible greenhouse effect, the third line. And fourth is global warming, the state of natural changing climate that's happened for 3.5 billion years. There isn't a bit of truth in the need for renewable energy. This is not my slide, is it? What's that?
Your global warming.
Right.
We have a
friend that's a world expert on climate change. He is one of the 5 in the world, and he can prove to you there's no such thing as climate change. He's the state climatologist in the state of Alabama. He's got the records from when they started till today, and he can show there's no such thing.
So is that Roy Spencer?
No,
No.
it's John Christie.
John Christie, okay, well, they're partners.
Yeah.
He runs the microwave sounding unit, one of the 4 satellites to record temperatures that we can rely on. Whereas the temperatures, I'm going to go one step further. Oh, there it is. He records, see the temperatures like this, the blue one is the raw temperature. So those are recorded at ground stations. But he has the other ones. So here's 2 examples. There's the raw temperature in blue, the raw one here. This is snow quality on the bottom, Davis, California on the top. Our people in NOAA, the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, changed the numbers. They changed the temperatures. So they changed it to this red curve so we can show, oh, look at the global warming. Now we can prove it. But they reduced the temperatures from about this point back and did the same for snow quality here. So you can almost see a rise in the red if you can imagine that line. This is what's been going on. This has been called one of the greatest frauds of all kinds. Of course, it's behind the fraud that Mr. Morris Strong started. I better end right there.
Thank you.
Yeah.